There we go.
Okay.
New system.
So let's just double check. Can everybody hear us?
I can.
Okay, Ed can. John, Scott, Julie, are you able to hear us okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Great. And Raul, you can hear us all right?
Perfectly.
Okay, excellent. So this is new technology for us, so it looks like everything is working perfectly. Well, if we are ready, then I will call the January 20th meeting of the Oregon Appraiser Certification and Licensure Board to order. It is 9 a.m. And Stephanie, would you do us the favor of taking a roll call?
Yes. Lori,
Here.
Julie,
Here.
Annie,
Here.
Ed,
Here.
Kathy,
Here.
Owen. I see and hear no Owen. Gary.
Here.
Okay. Staff in attendance today, we have Assistant Attorney General Raul Ramirez, Administrator Chad Cook, Compliance Investigator Dan Murphy, and Administrative Specialist Stephanie Kahn.
Excellent. And so we verified a quorum, correct, Stephanie?
Correct.
Excellent. Well, let us move on then to public input. Do we have anybody from the public that would like to say anything today? Hearing none. Let's move on. I would entertain a motion to adopt the October 21st board meeting minutes.
I will so motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Annie. Steph?
Yes. Lori,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
and Gary.
Yes.
Excellent. Motion carries. Well, let us move on to some new business here. So we had discussed at our last board meeting the possibility of making some fee changes. And Chad has included, you have that up?
Yeah.
Chad has given us something that we can propose actually publicly. Am I correct on that?
That would potentially start the rulemaking process today, but really it's written down more for discussion.
Right,
Whatever
exactly.
you all decide.
So have you all had a chance to take a look at the proposed fees? These are the ones that we had discussed at our last meeting. And Annie, there was, you had recommended the possibility of a tiered level for the late renewals.
Mm-hmm.
Are you liking the way this looks, or would you rather go with just a flat fee?
I like this, and I think the other alterations to the fees are pretty judicious. So I mean, I'm open to what other people say, but I really liked the idea of the tiered
Annie on that. Okay.
expiration. Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other input on any of the other fees? I know Owen's not here, and we had talked a little bit about, you know, if we're gonna raise our fees, let's do it and not,
Talk about it.
yeah, and not just do the little tiny incremental things that aren't really gonna help us much with our budget. Do we want to just go ahead and, you know?
And I do have some input on that if you want to talk a little bit further about
I think that would,
where we're at as far as late fee stuff or as far as renewal fee stuff.
I think that would be great. And Chad, did you want to do that during the budget report? I assume that you're going to cover that from Paul.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. And that will play in a little bit. We can kind of bounce back and forth.
Okay.
But as far as since this is up in front of everybody right
Let's do
now. So what I put into the rules here was, I think we just went with a straight $50 increase
Mhm.
to the licensing fee, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So based on some of the numbers we ran, and this is kind of bleeding into budget, as far as budget shortfall versus fee increases to get to the break-even point, some of those fees that you'll see are pretty nominal, like the $25 for the temporary non-resident permit, $25 for an application fee. So minimal things that aren't going to hurt a whole bunch of people's wallets. As far as the late fee on the licensing to obtain a license, to be approved for the exam, to become an appraiser, at $50, given the other some of the other fees that we've increased, at a $50 increase based on current numbers, we're just about at the break-even point in terms of for the last half of the biennium. So realistically, in terms of adopting any kind of new fees, they probably wouldn't be ready for adoption or implementation. In terms of nice, neat numbers, July 1st is the halfway point of the 25-27 biennium, and that just makes the math a lot easier on Paul's end
Right.
in terms of projecting and things like that. At a $50 late fee with the temporary non-resident permit increase of $25, that puts us right at, assuming that we
Don't lose
budgeted
any more.
everything correctly, we're right at the break-even point. A $75 increase coupled with some of those other minor fee increases and primarily the TNR, the temporary non-resident permits. We issue quite a number of those on a given year. So that, I ran some of those numbers, and if that were increased by $25, that's an additional, for the remainder of the biennium, be an additional 37,000-ish.
Okay.
In terms of coupling that with a $75 increase to the licensing fee, that puts, and the numbers are a little weird right now because we're in the first quarter of the biennium, or we just wrapped up the first quarter of the biennium. But as far as that goes, with the $75 increase, $150 late fee decrease to $150, and a temporary non-resident permit, that essentially puts us about $15,000-$20,000 above where we've projected expenses. So that would
Hey,
give us a
Chad?
little. Yeah,
Does that assume that nobody else
essentially,
doesn't,
yeah.
renewing and nobody retires and says, I don't need my license anymore? So that assumes that it's all the numbers stay the same as far as how many appraisers we have right now, correct?
In terms of the net effect of our population, and we lose some every year just because of,
Sure.
retirement and age and everything else. But as far as bringing new folks on, if we're factoring in Perea, which in theory, hopefully will generate some additional licensees here in the next 6 to 12 months. Given those changes that we've already made, these numbers are based on a net minimal or no change to the total
Okay.
population of appraisers.
Thanks.
Yeah. So as far as those fee increases go, and then the third one I think that we talked about was a potential $100 late fee or $100 licensing fee increase. That just being psychology being what it is, $100, I think people would notice that, and it's a little more significant than a $50 or $75 increase.
Okay, so can I make sure that I understand so what we've got on here, we're proposing $650. Now, you said you ran it at $650 and you ran it at $75?
And what I put in the rule there, just so we had a starting point, was the
Right.
$50.
Right, and so the $650 is theoretically break even.
Right.
And the 75 would give us a little bit of cushion.
Mhm.
We still have a little bit of cushion, but I don't know how the board feels about, obviously we don't want to raise fees if we don't have to. We don't want to be collecting more than we need
Right.
to run this board. But, to Julie's point, we're losing people.
Yeah.
So,
And that may change as well with UAD 3.6 coming on, right? We may lose more people than we anticipate losing.
I hope
I hope not either, but
not.
we just don't know how many people are going to jump
Kathy,
on.
with what coming on? What did you say?
Maybe
With what?
3.6,
I don't know what that
3.6.
is.
It's a new platform, basically, that residential appraisers are gonna have to be using for mortgage lending work.
It's a reporting methodology, basically an online portal as opposed to our historical. You've got your software and you fill in the form on the software and then you save it and sign it and then transmit it to your client. The UAD 3.6 is a Fannie and Freddie endeavor. And it's essentially part of the overarching trend that we've seen of standardizing our reporting methodologies and terms and all of that stuff. Really, I think it goes into building big data models.
And UAD
So
stands for.
why would people leave because of that?
Good question.
Curious.
Because it's a huge change for some people and some people aren't wanting to take on the change. Appraisers are always resistant to change,
I think most people are.
right?
What? What
Not
are you
just appraisers.
talking about? Come on, you guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay.
the older population that doesn't want to make the change into the new, learning something new, basically. There's been a lot of talk about people stepping out. I already know some appraisers that already have given up licenses because of it.
Which is interesting to me. It's just
Yes.
another way of reporting our data, you
Yeah.
know?
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, it's kind of a residential world reality right now, and we'll see how it plays out. But so with that information, I don't know of anybody that has actually given up their credential because of it. I've heard of people talking about it.
Well, I know Dawn retired because of UID 3.6.
Okay. Well, she was, anyway.
Yeah, so I know of a couple of others.
Right, so given that information, does the board, I would ask the board to consider whether or not a $75 increase might be more. But we're just talking about such small amounts of money here,
Right.
but it makes such a difference to us,
Right.
$25 here and there makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So,
we have any-
Chad, could you remind us when the existing rates were last established or adjusted?
Yeah, that would be, I think it was the first board meeting I ever attended, April of 2019. They went effective January 1 of 2020, I think, or maybe it was July. Yeah, it was
So-
July of 2019. So it's been 5.5 years. Prior to that, our last fee increase was never. I think when we established fees in the 90s, 92, 93, something like, there might have been
no,
one.
I think there was one in there somewhere.
It was 5 something for a while and then it went
Yeah.
to 640
Yeah.
and yeah.
But Ed, to your question, it doesn't happen very often.
Mhm.
And we are not alone. Pete could probably speak to, to how often he sees that. We'll maybe.
I guess that's what prompted the question is, should we not look at an adjustment that's closer to inflation and possibly create a factor in here that ties our fees to inflation going forward? Just to avoid this process?
Our finance guy speaking the truth. Thank you for that input, Ed. I think that there are some other factors playing into this beyond inflation, having to do primarily on the residential side. I think Annie can speak to this more if you've seen that many changes on the commercial side, but on the residential side, we've been taken out at knees, basically. And a lot of appraisers have exited the business, which is why we're seeing when you get your licensing report, that's kind of where we're at. So it's not really inflationary, I think.
It's part of it is inflation. I mean, just overall cost of doing business, period, has gone up in 5 years. But right now it's circumstantial, I think,
Yeah.
as far as rate driven. Those appraisers that primarily build their business model on on lending work.
Yeah.
Historically are primarily doing refinance work. That's the majority of the lion's share in a hot market, right? Or when rates are low.
When rates are low.
That's the majority of residential lending work is refi work. Well, if rates are high, and they are, that work then dries up. I've said this a few times. There's folks that have bought homes prior to 2020 and have 2% interest, like myself. And I will not be refinancing my house. I'll pay it off and die it.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. So that being the general trend, that means that what we've got is residential appraisers are now competing for the same, if they don't diversify their business model, they're competing for the same limited number of residential lending jobs, which in turn creates competition for fees, which, there's a lot of negative emotion out there right now surrounding that. So
Right.
we don't want to be the straw that broke the back, so to speak.
Yeah, so I think that that's kind of where we're at, is we need to, something that isn't gonna further push our licensees out. Something that's palatable, but something that, this board is self-funded, so, do we,
Annie's got her hand
oh,
up.
do you? I'm sorry, Andy, I didn't see that.
That's okay. Yeah, it seems like based on what we're talking about here is that there's this kind of balance between trying to make sure that we're solvent, but then also trying not to piss people off.
Right.
And it's kind of funny about the inflationary thing, because appraisers understand that. Like, they understand if we were growing fees based on inflation, because they get that. But if their fees aren't also going up by inflation, which they're not, that fees are not, that fees are not, they don't go by inflation also, that's probably not going to work. I think a good thing to do is, I think it's actually kind of important what Chad is saying, that fees haven't been raised since 2019. Okay. And I think that people, if they knew that, and that before that they were raised never, that would be a way of not alienating our licensees, would be to say, look, it's been 6 years. I think if there was a way to make that a little more apparent, like, we're making an announcement, we're raising our fees from 2019, or I don't know, but I don't think that the fees, we have to raise them.
Yeah.
We just,
Oh,
we
yeah.
have to.
And I think
So-
that's the question at hand is, whether or not we're going to do that. Raul, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just briefly, I know Chad mentioned it at the beginning of this discussion. This is just the beginning. So it's good to have this discussion, but whatever you determine looks good right now is going to need to go through a rulemaking process. And surely you will receive a lot of information that you can consider at the back end before you make any final decisions on what the fees will actually look like. So I think these are all good comments, but just keep in mind, you're going to probably get a lot of input from folks as far as what they think regarding the proposed fees.
So then maybe that's what we need to do is move on, and I might need help with language on a motion for that. But
Can I just make one other
Yeah,
comment before
of
we
course.
do, was even at this rate, I just renewed my Washington license and it's significantly more than this.
Right.
there's reason.
I know,
Mine's an
I
active.
know,
Yeah.
but I still paid it, right?
Yeah.
So my point is that I still paid it
Right,
because that license is still important to me,
right.
right? So even if we went up to 75, 675, that still should be equivalent to or less than what most appraisers make on one appraisal assignment.
Right.
And if you picture it that way, it's one assignment, maybe 1.5 assignments, right? In a year, in 2 years, that pays for that licensure, that importance of that piece of it. So
Gary, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, looking at my previous license in another state, looking at the fees that we paid. This is a blessing, the fees we pay in Oregon. We're not nearly where other states are charging for the renewals.
Right.
And when it comes to paying that fee, it's just doing business. It's part of doing business. If you can't muster yourself to pay $25, then you're really not serious to be in this business. It's where my take is. And if it's going to put us at a positive, we need to be at a positive. We're not a general funds agency. So I think licensees will understand to keep the integrity and to keep the investigative body and professionalism of this industry. I'll pay $50 per person. I'll pay more to keep that agency where it's in check with the appraisal licenses and things like that. And I think most appraisers will understand. Appraisers that are serious in this business will not, but will not have a problem with that fee increase. I'm open. Okay.
Glad to have you on. Well, then, as Raul pointed out, we are going to have to expose this
Oh, yeah.
to the public.
Yep.
So maybe we go with the $75 increase and see what people say.
And
You know,
again,
it's
there's
cool.
going to be a public input
Yeah.
process. There will be,
Started at 100.
there's a public hearing, there's a notice of that public hearing. And there's nothing that says that after the public hearing, you can't consider things. And the vote could be something different than what's written down on that piece of paper there.
Exactly.
So as far as the motion goes, it would be just to expose or to start the rulemaking process to propose raising licensing fees by 75 and those other certain fees by 25, essentially.
I'm sorry,
And then it would,
sorry, I just wanted, before we get to doing motion, I had a question. I couldn't quite hear what was happening at the end of the table over there. Do we know how our fees, was I hearing Do we know what our fees are compared to other states?
Gary, do you want to speak on that maybe and just enunciate and just project?
Just for example, where I think California cost of living and Oregon cost of living is very similar at this point in time. California initial licensing for a certified residential is $1,035.
Oh.
Certified residential is $1,100 and general is $1,100 as well. Renewals are the same. So, and I don't think Oregon's cost of living is much different. I moved up here 5-6 years ago, and I find property taxes are similar, cost of living is similar. The only benefit we have is lower gas. Everything else is pretty much in line. So I think Ed mentioned about cost of living and us being at par with our fees. I think we have room in terms of increasing fees to supplement the shortfalls of this agency.
Well, comparing our fees to other states, 'cause I'm licensed in 7 jurisdictions and they're all over the board. Montana is like almost nothing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, they go from $200 to $1,200. So I think the comparison maybe isn't.
Right.
It just, Andy, for your,
Mhm.
I just paid $900 for my Washington license.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
anybody that's dual license between Oregon and Washington, and that license is important to them, they're gonna continue to pay it.
Is that a yearly renewal or?
It's
is it
every 2 years as well.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It expires the same month, so.
Okay.
as-
So leave California's annual. Sorry.
Mhm. It's continuing ed as every 2 years.
I might be
Yeah.
wrong.
Mm,
So
okay.
that's significant more than California, yeah. In California, significant if it's annual.
I know that's another thing Camille has looked at also, is comparing other states if they have a yearly renewal or if they're every 2 years like we are.
And I'm not sure which process.
But there's some.
Which is why we're talking about harmonization today.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. So, is there any more discussion on this? Okay, then how about I would entertain a motion, and I can't make that motion, but maybe Chad could restate it and somebody could say, yeah, that.
Yes, ma'am. So the motion, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but the motion would theoretically be to start the rulemaking process to propose raising fees for licensing that would be 75 and for other miscellaneous fees related to licensing, such as temporary non-resident permits, application fees for exams, that would be 25.
Renewal also going up from 15 to 75. That's part of it.
Yeah.
And I stand corrected, California's every 2 years.
And so at 75, that proposed licensing fee would be $715.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Excellent. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Perfect. Stephanie?
Lori,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
and Gary.
Yes.
Perfect. Motion passes. Well, on to our next order of business, and we have some very special guests with us today in person. We have Mr. Pete Fontana with the State Harmonization Task Force of the Appraisal Foundation, and online. Oh, we have John. There he is. He's online. And Scott DiBiasio. I'm not sure if he's muted right now, but both of you welcome and thank you for being here. I'm going to turn the table over to you.
Thank you very much. We're pleased to be here. I'll give you just a little background on myself and my partners on our task force and what our mission and goal is at the foundation. So my name is Pete Fontana. I am one of your professional colleagues as well. I chair the Montana Board of Real Estate Appraisers and have been on that board for 15 years. And I've been the chair for the past 6 years. I also serve on the Board of Trustees with the Appraisal Foundation. This is my last year and my 7th year as a trustee on the Appraisal Foundation. And I also serve on the Board of Directors for the Association of Regulatory Officials, which is ARO, which is the trade group that represents regulatory officials in the national arena. So our task force was set up last January by our immediate past chair, Ray Wagester, to take a look at states and try to figure out which states had overlays over and above the appraisal qualification board's criteria to become an appraiser. So FIREA set in place the licensing requirements for states to stand up these appraisal programs, and then gave congressional authority to the Appraisal Foundation to set standards and qualification criteria. So FIREA does not allow states to go below the minimum criteria that's set by the foundation, but they can have add-ons to the criteria in the form of what we call overlays. And so these overlays, there's only 9 states that accept the criteria by reference. And so meaning that anytime the criteria changes, which is in the process of a radical change now that we haven't had a change this large since 2015, and it's necessary to do that because the appraisal profession is changing in how we do business and how we do how experience is gained and how with AI technology how we're going to take care of that in use path. So we're at the foundation, we are in the process of changing those processes and how we look at experience. And so
Can I interject for just, so it's later in our meeting, I have it on here to discuss or to just let everybody know what some of those proposed changes to the AQB criteria are. Could you touch on some of those? Or are you planning on doing that?
Yes, we can do that.
That would be great, just so that,
Yep, happy to do that too. So what our task force did was took a look at all 50 states plus the 5 jurisdictions that are under the control of the foundation, and looked at to see if there's any of these restrictive overlays. Because the problem with our industry is, and you guys talked about it just a minute ago, we are losing people out of this profession at a pace that we've never seen before. Where this was a study done by an independent organization. In 2016, there was 92,000 unique appraisers in America. This isn't appraisers that are licensed in 5 states, and that counts as 5 licenses. This is unique identified appraisers. By 2025, that number had shrunk to 65,000. So we lost almost 30% of the appraisers from 2016 to 2025. The prediction is by the same independent organization is that by 2030, the next 4 years, we're going to lose another 14,000 appraisers, which means there's not going to be enough appraisers to do the collateral work that's necessary in this environment, and specifically in the residential world. So one of the comments was, are we going to lose appraisers because of the advent of the new reporting form, UAD 3.6? And by our account at the foundation, we believe that 15% of the appraisers will drop out and not renew their license. And that's not a guess. That's based on some analysis we've done. For example, the largest software provider for residential appraisal work is Alamode Software, Totality, and they have 40,000 customers. Of those 40,000 customers, only 22% of those appraisers are using the mobile technology right now that's been out for over 10 years, meaning 22% of those folks are gathering data on an iPad and an iPhone that's been available for 10 years. And you assume that all of a sudden that 78% of their customers are going to pick up an iPad and say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start digitally sketching and digitally photoing and capturing data. It's not going to happen. There's going to be people that just say, this is it for me. I'm an old dog and I don't want to learn a new trick. And so we are going to see a 15% reduction in the appraisers, and that's going to affect your licensing. And that's why you guys just talked about the fee structure. That's happening. It's going to happen. There's no stopping that. And so how are we going to replenish the ranks of these appraisers? And so one way is we have to have each state look at their requirements for admission into the profession and say, we have overlays, and are they restricting people getting in this profession that are otherwise qualified to practice? And so where are we going to get these people from? And so the state of Oregon's rules and regulations are actually pretty good. You should be proud of that. But there are 3 restrictions in your regulations that keep people from being able to use relevant experience. Number 1, you don't specifically allow mass appraisal experience. Number 2, you only allow 25% experience for a bank review appraiser or a review appraiser. And the ACLB criteria allows that experience 100%. And number 3, which is one that I wasn't aware of until earlier today, when we were reading your rules and regulations. Hold on here just 1 second, because this one was new to me. It looks like you don't accept desktop appraisal experience, which is going to affect anybody that's doing property data collection reports under the hybrid model. And so you're still signing the certification. You're certifying that the information you received to complete the appraisal was sufficient to render a credible opinion of value. But evidently, under your rules, you don't accept that type of work, and that's going to be a big bulk of the work moving forward. And so that's kind of a unique one for us. And so that's what we're here today to discuss, some of the options that you would have. And don't forget, the new criteria is coming on, and it's in the exposure drafts out now. And so some of those are, eliminating the college degree requirement. Some of those are eliminating experience altogether in substitution for an exam. And we can talk about these after, and that's just the exposure draft process. So once that process is finished and they adopt the new criteria, every state's going to have to do something to their rules or statutes to adopt the new criteria. And once you open your rules up, we're asking you to take a look at some of these other barriers to entry and say, okay, why do we have them to begin with? And if they don't make any sense to you, and you can't have a statement of reasonable necessity why you have them, for example, the reason we don't allow desktop appraisals is because our first-time test taker scores are better because people are getting better trained the old-fashioned way. Or we have less complaints because of this overlay. Unless you can have a statement of reasonable necessity why you have the overlay, I just ask you that, why do we have an overlay like this if we can't really quantify? So, for example, in Nevada and in Indiana, they have never adopted the 2015 criteria. So a licensed appraiser in Nevada has to have 2,500 hours experience and have to be in that position for 18 months. The criteria says 1,500 hours in 1 year. Well, if you can't show that their first-time test taker scores are better because they have more experience, then what's the point of having somebody have an extra 1,000 hours? It's just a significant barrier to entry. And so some of these barriers are failure to adopt the previous criteria. And so with that, what I want to do is our task force was built up of 5 trustees. All of us have some kind of regulatory experience. And then we had stakeholders that are deeply involved in a state regulatory process, such as the Appraisal Institute, Scott DiBiasio, John Russell, that is a consultant, has years and years of experience with ASA and has his own consulting firm. We invited these people to be on the task force because they understand state regulation, and we need to be able to dissect that. And so with that, I want to introduce my colleague, John Russell, and turn this over to him so he can talk to you specifically about some of the overlays you have and some of the ways that we can improve that process to help you over that hump.
Great. Thanks, John. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Good morning to all of you. Thank you, Pete, for the introduction. Again, my name is John Russell. I'm a former member of the Board of Trustees of the Appraisal Foundation, and I keep finding myself voluntold into various roles at the organization. I work on the governance task force that created the overhaul that led to partners instead of sponsors. I'm currently here with state harmonization. I was part of the team that worked on the Pathways to Success grant program that supported the implementation and creation of PREA. So I just keep getting these interesting projects put in front of me. And part of why I really jumped at the chance to work on Pete's task force on state harmonization is because, as we've been having more and more conversations with states, a couple of themes kind of emerge. One is In some cases, you have states, Indiana's a prime example, they weren't even necessarily aware of half of the overlays that we identified and kind of discussed with them as part of our conversation. The other one too is just you go over the 35, 36-year arc of FIREA and its implementation through today, and some things that were still in rules that made sense at one point in time based on available technology no longer make sense. So a great example of that, Pete went down to Alabama. They had a rule on the books. You couldn't get credit for experience for an assignment done 50 miles from the address of your principal place of business. Well, obviously technology's made it a lot easier, right, to do those kinds of assignments. And the Alabama board took one look at that and said, yeah, you're right. That makes sense to, why are we doing that in 2025, 2026? So they went ahead and made a change to their rules based on that conversation. So what we're really trying to do is stimulate conversation around those overlays, additional requirements, or in the case of mass appraisal experience, which I'll touch on in a moment, the absence of pathways, kind of talk about our thought process, surfacing what we've noticed in other places when we have these conversations. Ultimately, we're here to be a resource. You know, I think when people hear we have this task force, they fear it's some bully pulpit, we're coming in to tell you what to do. That's absolutely not the case. What we want to say is, hey, this is what we see you doing versus your peer group. It's something we just want to bring up that may be worth a conversation for you as a board. And if you want to make changes, whether it's sooner or later as we get into this next iteration of the criteria, we're here to just be a resource. We're not going to disappear. We're not going to go away. This is something that will persist throughout the next round of changes to the criteria. So with that, the one big thing I'm going to touch on is that absence of credit for mass appraisal experience. And before I talk about the what in terms of why that's been a point of focus for us on this task force, I'm going to talk about the why. When you think about individuals on a short-term horizon who will help backfill the capacity challenges I think we all recognize to some degree are going to be coming into the profession, you know, one, it helps to identify people who already have a demonstrated interest in and passion for appraisal and valuation. You want individuals who traditionally work in professional work settings and environments. You want individuals who are inherently technologically savvy, especially as we transition to UAD 3.6 and the fact that that's going to be predominantly a cloud-based technology-first solution. Not to say you can't do it using more traditional methods, but it's going to be a heck of a lot clunkier than going the technological adoption route. So when you think of those qualities, those are things that already exist in the assessor population. And what makes the assessor population a uniquely positive resource for potential new licensees to appraisal is you have assessors' offices in virtually every county in the United States. And in these offices, you have individuals who are not just dealing with individual parcels on a daily basis, but they're dealing with hundreds, if not thousands of parcels on a daily to annual basis, looking at what it is that they have in their community, in their county, figuring out the modeling, how that's going to operate, correcting for errors, doing the kind of data analytic work that we're seeing more of an emphasis on. Like if you look at 3.6 and you focus on reporting, there's a bigger emphasis on the analytical process. I always kind of crystallize it by saying things you should have been doing and capturing in your work file, we're now going to pull forward into reporting, which means you got to spend more time on it in development, right? So those are all skills that assessors inherently have in the nature of the work that they do. So as far as a group of individuals who we look at and say, hey, if we think 15% might walk out the door in the next 12 months, how could we backfill for that capacity so that, look, forget for a moment as a licensing agency, will I have enough licensees to oversee? Will it negatively affect my revenues? Focus on it from the credit origination and lending side. Will we have enough appraisers to support people who want to buy or refinance a home, being able to engage in that activity in the state of Oregon, right? That's really what this comes down to. So assessors are really uniquely positioned to help backfill that short-term capacity gap that we anticipate is going to be coming. I'll give you by way of a statistic. When we were with Pennsylvania, they are a June 30 renewal state. We were with them the middle of June in 2025. They only have certified residential, but it captures their whole residential appraisal population. Their renewal rate 2 weeks before their due by date was 56%. There is no way they closed a 44% non-renewal gap by the end of June 30. So they've already started experiencing some of that fall off we anticipate more broadly on a go-forward basis. So that's why we've kind of focused on assessors and mass appraisal experience to say, hey, this is a great opportunity to get people in who we know have a skill set, interest, and background that aligns with coming into appraisal, making sure that we have ways, and Pete can speak to this a little bit more, but we have ways to kind of cross-check to make sure that even though they're doing work that I believe yours is a state where you're not required statutorily to adhere to use path, there's ways you can cross-check to make sure that they can perform a use path compliant appraisal, especially in standard 1 and 2. Montana has a model that addresses that. But these are folks that we see as an opportunity to, in the short term, stave off some of the attrition we see coming. I do see that I have a hand, so happy to pause here and just have any questions or conversation around that main talking point.
Yeah, Julie,
John,
did you have a question?
John, I was wondering, so I hear what you're saying about mass appraisal, but did you guys do any research on Oregon and what Oregon, like, so they have different levels at the assessor's office, so you can be an appraiser 1, 2, 3. Did you guys do any research as far as what those particular job classifications actually do? Because some of those don't even do any kind of analysis. They go out, they inspect a property, they bring their, they'll go out and they'll inspect 30 properties in a day, and then they come back and they bring the data back and they hand it to somebody else to go do the analysis. So did you guys do any research as far as like what that looks like in this particular state?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Pete on that. We do actually have a sister task force, Julie, with the International Association of Assessing Officers. So when it comes to that level of detail, they've tended to handle that. Pete, is that something that they've addressed specifically with the Oregon example?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. To help you with that question, there's a way that you can look. The AQB is looking at other alternative experience to qualify for licensure. Paths that aren't even really appraisal related, like brokers, home inspectors, because there's this big push to have other experience recognized. There's also a big push to eliminate the experience altogether, not from the AQB standpoint, but from industry stakeholder standpoint, because of the barrier to entry of what I call like this nepotism, where everybody that gets licensed, or the majority of people get licensed in this industry, are related to somebody else. We've run the gamut on that. The third generation of people don't want to be appraisers. And so this old supervisor mentor training model that keeps people out of this business because they can't find a supervisor, yet can take all the qualifying ed and but can't find a supervisor, is really a problem in moving forward. So the AQB is looking at alternative experience to just that particular model. And so let me just. So I started as a county assessor in one of the largest counties in Montana with zero experience. I was an accountant when I was 27 years old. And so I gained all my experience and took the exam and showed some work product to get my license way back in the day. So let me propose this to you as a board member. What difference does it make to you where their experience comes from if they took all of the qualifying education required, and it's all standard 1 and 2 based education, and they proved that they had 1,000 hours of useful and relevant experience, whether it's just inspecting properties at the assessor's office, whether it's the model building, let's just propose that it doesn't really matter. And then they take the rigorous national certification exam that only has a 62% pass-fail ratio for the current model that everybody thinks is the best, meaning the supervisor is doing such a good job that only 62% of the people are passing the exam. And so they have to take that rigorous exam that's all standard 1 and 2 based. And then you can do like we do in Montana that in Utah that is accepted by the Appraisal Standards Board, require those individuals to submit 2, 3, or 4 standard 1 and 2 reports that you can have your investigator review. And when your investigator comes back and says, wow, this is actually pretty good work, they understand what they're doing. They actually apply use path and wrote a compliant standard 1 and 2 report. At that point, what difference does it make where their experience came from? They demonstrated competency. They demonstrated proficiency. And so if you're going to accept brokers' experience and home inspectors' experience, really, from the regulatory standpoint, your concern is, can they write a compliant standard 1 and 2 report, apply all that education, whatever experience they had, and then pass that exam. So basically, Julie, what I'm saying is that you can be confident as a board member that they're competent to complete work because you've actually reviewed their work. Does that help at all? Like, where we don't have to get down in the weeds about what they were doing, just that they captured the amount of hours necessary to qualify for licensure.
Yeah, that wasn't really what I was asking, though. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but the answer to my question sounds like, no, it wasn't Oregon specific. And that's all I was asking.
Oh,
I understand we're
yeah,
trying
it wasn't
to,
Oregon specific.
we're
No,
trying to
absolutely
eliminate
not.
barriers to entry. I do understand that. Don't get me wrong. I
Okay.
see our numbers every meeting that we have, and I see our numbers going down. What I was asking was, did you guys do any specific Oregon research to find out what kind of actual experience at the assessor's office they're giving people? And having hold on, I wasn't finished. Having worked at the Department of Revenue, who oversaw the counties, I got to see what like an appraiser 1, they're going out and they're inspecting properties. They're coming back. They're not doing any data input. They're not doing anything except for inspecting 30 in a day, give them back to whoever the appraiser 2 is so they can work on them. And so I'm just trying to get an idea of, because unless I heard you wrong, you said that where you came from, mass appraisal, like that experience was 100%, where Oregon's 25%. Was that right? Is that what you said?
Oregon is not 0. It's 25% for review appraisal.
Okay, so that's all I was asking. I was trying to figure out, like, I don't know that you could seriously tell me that somebody that worked at an assessor's office could come and pass our licensing, even if they had all the courses, could pass our licensing exams right now based on like what I've seen. So that's all I'm saying.
And that's the point, Julie. That's a great point. That's the stopgap. That exam, that rigorous exam, is really the gatekeeper. And that if they can't pass it, then they don't have the experience necessary to practice.
And I would just, in terms of this conversation, I think that when you fixate specifically on the exacting roles and responsibilities of that individual, well, one, there's nothing forestalling them from getting additional experience outside of their assessor work, right? So let's say,
I think that depends. That actually depends, John. Some people can't. Like, I work at the Department of Transportation. We're not allowed to have an active license. Okay, so we can't go do outside work to gain additional experience. So, like, it does depend.
So I guess what I'm hearing too is then you've got the same kind of roadblock affecting those individuals doing right-of-way or eminent domain work in your state. To which I would say, as somebody who's looking at opportunities to bring otherwise interested and qualified professionals with demonstrated capacity into this workforce that we know has a capacity challenge, those are the things that we want to attack head on, right? And we're not going to get it to 100% where right now I would tell you based on statistics, I know Scott's with us, he can speak to them. PAREA is the gold standard. Everyone who's gone through PAREA is passing at a 100% pass rate on the LR exam, right? But if that's good, if we can't hold everyone to that same exacting outcome specific goal, but how can we create more pathways of opportunity generally within the rubric that we have today for those individuals, if they so choose, to then come over and obtain licensure or certification. So if you've got a state statute that says, hey, you can't be licensed or certified, yes, that's going to be a definite challenge to overcome. If it's going to preclude somebody from coming over from eminent domain right-of-way work, mass appraisal work, I would say rather than focusing on the specific limitations and kind of boxing in, think more expansively and inclusively of how can we better create opportunity for those interested individuals. Because not everybody's going to have that interest, but let's say you have somebody who's put in their years with the state government job in DOT, in assessment, whatever, someone wants to have a second career. Are we going to make it harder for them or more challenging for them by not allowing any of the otherwise quality experience to count for anything coming in to the licensure process? That's the way I kind of think about it, is how do we fit those folks into this licensing structure we have today? And there's not going to be a perfect answer necessarily, but I think if we just kind of stay very structured with the whole thought process, we're never going to solve for the problem in the first instance anyway. And that's really the goal of these conversations, is to say, hey, can we just think a little bit differently? To the extent there are things that this board controls versus the things that you don't control that your legislature may have to address or another state agency may have to consider as a policy change or regulation change.
So John and Pete, let me make sure I understand. You're here to start this conversation
Right.
with our board. And you just pointed out 3 huge areas of opportunity that we have. We're not trying to settle this today.
No, absolutely not.
And when we get to that point, you're still going to be, because you've been voluntold that you're going to be in this role. And so we would have the ability to come to you and say, hey, these are some of the challenges that we're seeing. To Julie's point, we've got some things that are very specific to Oregon that need to be researched and whatnot. So, so it looks like at this point, we've got 3 really big areas. You and I made eye contact when we saw the desktop thing. It's like, what?
Yeah, this isn't a one and done for us. We're not here as a regulator. We don't regulate. We're not here as an overseer. We're not here as the ASC to audit you. We're here to let you know we're outside the Beltway as a resource, and we're not going away. So we're going to be here. In fact, we just had our first task force meeting of 2026. We have new members because we have new trustees. We have a new industry member from the ASFMRA. And so we have now assigned task force members to, once John and I do our initial visit, that they will attend your meetings. In the background, you have questions for them, they're available to answer them. Because as the criteria change proposals move forward, you're going to have questions. And so we're going to have somebody at every one of your board meetings as a resource.
So you're not going to come to Oregon 4 times a year?
I might. I might. Me and John are available to go anywhere.
Go on over, John. I know you don't have very far to fly.
John would be here, but he had a prior engagement today in the DC area.
Right.
But yes, we are here as a resource.
That's wonderful.
And we are here just to point out some opportunities.
Right.
We're here to point out some solutions that the appraisal subcommittee that they approved, which is if you don't feel comfortable with the experience, whether it's in Alabama, Julie, to your point, I hear you work for the Department of Transportation here in Alabama, they couldn't qualify a DOT appraiser with 20 years experience because there was a provision in the criteria that said all the experience had to be USPAP compliant.
We have.
Yeah, and so they are in the process of revisiting that in the criteria because you can't hold people to USPAP that are brokers or home inspectors or mass appraisers where the state legislature doesn't require them to be USPAP compliant. That doesn't mean they're not engaged in the appraisal practice. And that's why when you ask for a couple of reports from them to make sure that they can apply USPAP in a meaningful way that complies with what your regulations are. So,
Can you pick up on that for just
yeah.
a second? Let me make sure I understand. So the experience, okay, so our statute states that the experience must be USPAP compliant. What you're saying is perhaps the experience itself does not need to be USPAP compliant, but they need to be able to demonstrate that they can.
Indeed, demonstration appraisal
So-
report submitted.
Indeed.
Like with our current process, we use a reliable means of verifying USPAP compliance and
Right.
experience. Take the word USPAP out. We're just looking to establish that they have minimum competence. And this is at every ARO meeting I've been to.
Yes.
We are not creating experts by approving someone to take the exam. That happens over a decade or more after you're licensed. So in terms of the practical matter of, is this person qualified? Are they not going to be a danger to the market at large if we approve them to take their exam? That demonstration work, our audit process is really, that's our first stopgap measure. So I kind of get what you're saying in terms of who cares where the experience came from. If the end product is the same quality of a report that I would have been able to produce after working when I got licensed for 1.5 years with my certified residential supervisor, if another person can demonstrate that without having that supervision process, what is the end result? It's a zero-sum game, right? It's the same end result.
And that's what, like we refer to as a capstone, less like, no different than in the Appraisal Institute's designation program. You can go through the designation program, but the end result is, can you generate a report in that capstone setting that demonstrates that you learned what they wanted you to learn to get that designation? So it doesn't matter what pace you learned at, how you learned, but can you demonstrate? And so that's where, that's what we're proposing to states, is that really it's the end game. It's experience, wherever it comes from, coursework, which is rigorous now. And then if you can demonstrate through work product that you know what you're doing, then provide them a license. And I always say this, really, state regulatory boards shouldn't be in the business of keeping people out of the profession. Really, what we should be doing is being in the business of protecting the public when a complaint's filed to see if there's harmful actors. But we shouldn't be saying you can't get in because you can't get the experience. That's why our industry's dying. We cannot replenish these ranks with the current model that we have, because the biggest complaint we get at our board, I'm sure you do, is I can't find a supervisor. Yep. I took these classes, I spent $3,000 and no supervisor. That's disingenuous to get education providers to provide education to people, and then there's no way that they're going to get in this business. And that's not good for our profession. And so that's why there's a big push from a lot of, like, the Industry Advisory Council of the foundation that represents all the for-profit organizations. There's a big push from them to say they want no experience. And so think about it like in the legal practice. You go to school to become a lawyer. John's one, becomes a lawyer, never practices. That doesn't mean he's not a lawyer. And that doesn't mean he's going to try a capital murder case tomorrow either, nor would you hire him. But he still met the minimum compliance to become a lawyer. Same with CPAs. You graduate in accounting, you take the CPA review, you take the exam, you're a CPA with no experience. And so we put so much emphasis on the specific kind of experience that somebody needs and who needs to drag you around, that we're losing practitioners because we have run that nepotism model into the ground. The third generation of people don't want to be appraisers. These kids don't want that. And so we are left with an industry that's dying. And if we don't do something about that, these firms that want to collateralize loans like Fannie and Freddie, they'll get that collateralization value somehow, whether it's ABMs, whether it's waivers, whether it's the de minimis, not having an appraisal at $400,000. They don't want that. But if there's no appraisers, they have no option.
Right. Writing our own demise, in essence, is what could possibly happen.
Is what?
Writing our own demise is what.
We are writing our own demise because we're so restrictive and so protective of our profession that we say you have to do this. Well, that's why we have that exam that only 60, the certified general exam, 55% first time pass fail take ratio. And that's what people that are supposed to be the most advanced supervisors, the certified general, 55% pass that on their first try.
With a college degree.
With the college degree. So that's where we're just asking to think outside the box. We're not asking to reduce any requirement that the AQB has, but ask yourself, do we need this overlay? And we can assure ourselves this candidate is good because we're getting work product that your investigator can review and say, man, this is actually pretty good. And what did we hear, John and Scott, from was somebody in Mississippi or Alabama that they said that some of the work out of the practicum in Perea was the best appraisal work they've seen?
Yeah, when you're getting it from these alternative streams, so whether it's practicum, Perea, individuals coming from the assessor background, even when they're doing the demonstration reports, they're producing some of the best work product that boards have seen in terms of saying, hey, this individual clearly demonstrates the ability to adhere to USPAP and apply the relevant standards accordingly. I would just add to Pete's thought. For me, and this is just my personal view, it's not reflected in the first exposure draft in any meaningful way. I think the biggest emphasis is what's relevant experience to what's going to make you a minimally qualified, but hopefully good appraiser, right? When you start, you get that license and you go out and you start working in the world. And there's a lot of things that can help inform what's going to make somebody minimally qualified, but gives them the solid underpinnings to understand what goes into the development and reporting process. And it doesn't necessarily fit neatly or align perfectly with the current system we have, which does require USPAP compliance. There's no way of getting around that because it is hardwired into the criteria. Now, what I would offer, and this is something when you look at the materials, and Pete, I think you provided them the leave behinds already. If not, we'll make sure that you get them. But one of the things that we have in there really walks through how to look at a mass appraisal report and kind of align it with how standard 5 and 6 would expect that to have been developed and reported by an individual seeking to get credit for that experience. And for me, personally, I don't get hung up on do I see a signed certification? Because that is literally the last thing you're doing as part of this whole process. I want to look back and say, hey, did they follow a development process that aligns with what USPAP would expect? Did they report their assignment results in a way that USPAP would expect? If they've done that, really, that's the core of what we need to be focused on when thinking about what type of experience should we be considering and how should we be considering it. And then to Pete's earlier point, if ultimately that's not comfortable enough, Montana passes their ASC reviews with the system they have with the 3 standard 1-2 demo reports for work product review. That creates no problem on the compliance side, and it gives you the ability to look at whether or not somebody can do standard 1 and 2 work before you extend them that license or certification, right? So there's some different opportunities there to consider. At the end of the day, as Pete keeps talking about, and I think it's something we feel very passionately about, this is a problem today, right? This isn't just some all over the horizon, we're going to lose a bunch of people. We're there. We've already lost a third of the workforce, and we're going to lose another 15% potentially this year. That's not long-term sustainable. We got to figure out right now, as we're in the midst of the crisis, how are we going to backfill capacity and create opportunities for anybody who has the interest and the ability to become an appraiser who's licensed or certified? How are we going to get them in that door in a way that reflects and respects the work they've done previously, that kind of gets them in that direction?
And this is why the Industry Advisory Council's comment letter to the exposure draft was so radical, saying that they said, we want to do with experience altogether, because they're the ones that are actually using the appraisal service. These are the biggest banks. So our Industry Advisory Council is the biggest banks, the biggest AMCs. They're the ones that know that there's a shortage of appraisers and know what the problem is, and it's a supervisor model. And if we don't use this other experience that's available, these people are in the appraisal practice already. Whether they're only doing data gathering or whether they're doing some modeling, they're invested in our profession, and we're not accepting their experience. So the alternative is that all the big players that advise the foundation, the biggest banks in the United States, the biggest appraisal management companies, they're saying, get rid of this experience and we're not going to have appraisers. We need appraisers. They want appraisers. And if we don't, we're killing our own profession.
Yeah, I think that, well, just from what I know about this board, we would have a hard time not having any experience.
Well, and we're not here to advocate that.
Exactly.
I'm just saying that's the comment letter from the biggest users of appraisal services to the AQB on their exposure draft, is that you have done nothing, not enough to solve this problem.
Right.
That's why we're here, trying to solve it in a meaningful way that says,
Precisely.
these people have experience. We're not saying no experience, but test them and take a report from them and assure yourself that they're okay. And I got to tell you, in Montana, it was a compromise. Our commercial appraisers didn't like the fact that we were going to expect mass appraisal work. And I said, well, then let's just ask for some reports from them. And they were good with that. They were like, okay, let's make them do reports. We've licensed 5 mass appraisers over the last 5 years. It's not like they're running to the doors for you, but there was 5 of them, and every one of their work was exemplary. And we have that data. We keep that data, and we licensed a federal bank reviewer with 100% bank review experience. And I will tell you that those reviews were as comprehensive as anything I'd ever seen in my life. And then she wrote 2 reports, but we let her use all that experience. But I read those federal bank reviews, and that's all she did for experience. And the criteria allows that, and they were outstanding. And it's like she's probably more qualified because she's reviewing and commenting than just an appraiser that doesn't look at everybody else's work. And so here you only allow 25% of that experience. Again, capstone, make them write a report.
I think that that's just brilliant. I mean, I think that it should be a law that every appraiser must do appraisal reviews for an entire year.
You will not get a bunch of people running in here to ask for a license with appraisal reviews, but it's open an opportunity.
I think it's a huge opportunity.
In Nebraska, there was a banker on the board. The banker on the board was like, that's a great idea. Let's be doing that. Because Nebraska had the same 25% restriction. And so they're in the process of updating that because the criteria allows it.
Yeah.
I think that maybe that's where a lot of the confusion is coming in, is that I think that a lot of states don't realize how much flexibility there is in the criteria.
Yeah.
And a lot of this came from our predecessors. None of us were here when this all got written.
You're not alone, because most boards would go to them, they're like, well, I didn't put that rule in place. Like, why do we have that? Because they really never looked at it at the granular level. They were just like, okay, well, licensing takes the applications, then we get them and we approve them, and okay. But they don't ever get the report of the difficulty of the people that got turned away.
Right.
Because their experience that they had doesn't count, because we don't allow it. And that's the real crux of what our task force is doing, is just trying to make the boards aware of opportunities. I'm not here to tell you to change a thing. I hope you do. I'm just here to say these are opportunities. Our profession is dying. We're here to try to preserve it and not compromise the integrity of it at all.
Have you, as part of the task force, have you guys entertained the idea of incentivizing supervisors to take on trainees, giving some type of a fee reduction or fee waivers for licensing renewal? I mean, putting the old system, kind of just putting a new kick to it and getting, like, talking to colleagues.
50% discount for becoming a.
Yeah.
Don't charge them to become a supervisor.
Yeah, I don't think that changes the supervisor model. We still have supervisors that were trained by their supervisors to only do stick-built. They've never done a manufactured home, so they're never going to train on a manufactured home. So.
Oh, that's a
it doesn't-
deficit.
it
The
doesn't
garbage,
change.
I'll answer both those questions because they're both extremely relevant. Number one, the State Harmonization Task Force has thought about that, but our president of the foundation has got this big, bold goal there's $50 million sitting in a fund at the appraisal subcommittee for grants. And we're going to ask for a big bulk of that because we want to put some kind of incentive program together where we're going to pay supervisors, literally compensate them, because they're like, well, it's too much time, I don't get paid.
Right.
We're going to take some of that ASC money that's sitting around that none of the states are asking for. We are. And what do you ask, 150,000, 200,000? There's 50 million.
Yeah.
And we want to take that and say, yeah,
That's another.
so that's one thing. Number two, though, to your point, Kathy, if your supervisor is in southern Florida and the only thing you do is condos, because that's what they do down there, and then you go take that test and ask you to convert 2 acres to square footage and stuff, and you're like, I don't even know, do condos have land? I mean, that's why they're failing the test, because they're so siloed.
Yeah.
But in Perea and the practicums, they're exposed to everything, and that's why they're passing the exam. And I would say the same thing about assessors. They are in these communities exposed to every property, ag land, condos, co-ops, whatever you got. Now, they might not be experts in it, but they already know about it. And so in Colorado, they're keeping stats for us. They've licensed 16 assessment personnel. All 16 of them passed the test on the first try. And in the last 5 years, not one single person has had a complaint filed against them. So they're keeping those stats for us in Colorado. So they haven't had a single complaint filed against one of these people that got their license as an assessor would use their experience. They're not a danger to the public, and that should be what we're concerned about. And if they get a complaint filed, you guys address it. Not here to take their license. I don't care. Suspend them. I don't care. I'm not here to tell you that. But let's not tortiously interfere with people getting into the business that have relevant experience. And that's what we're doing. And not intentional. Because historically, boards did not approve mass appraisal because they didn't know how to review it. They didn't understand it. It's different. You don't know what you're doing. It's part of USPAP. It's an appraisal process. It's just different than what we do. Think about business valuers, standards 9 and 10. They're doing complex business valuation. And so a CPA from a big 8 accounting firm can't turn in his experience, and he's been valuing real estate trusts and portfolios, not like a real estate appraiser would do, but none of that experience counts for him to get a general certification, and he's probably doing more complex work, but there's no provision for that experience to count. That's nonsense. That's ridiculous. And that's what the AQB is looking at. So we have a business valuation advisory board. We have standards 9 and 10 for business valuers and personal property valuers. So your personal property appraiser, you can't transition into real property because none of that experience counts. For real, it's just a different appraisal assignment. And so that's where we have to think outside the box here. So how come personal appraisal experience can't count? I'm a fine arts valuer. I'm a valuer. I understand the sales comparison approach. I understand the replacement cost of this item. I don't care if it's tractors. I don't care what it is. That's appraisal experience. It's just different than what we do. But then you make them take all those classes that we do, make them take the test, what we do, and then make them show you that they can do the work like we do. Why do you care where the experience came from if they can do all that? That's what we're here to say. It's just think about that. If we don't open our minds to that and are relying on the supervisor model, we're dead.
You mentioned Colorado that already took on some ad valorem type of appraisers into the lesson. What have you seen other states that have adopted what you're suggesting and maybe dropping the desktop or adding on ad valorem type of appraisals to their experience criteria? What influx of appraisers are coming in? I mean, how much of a dent is this entire thing putting? I guess where I'm going is
that's difficult to quantify. I've only been doing this for 11 months.
Okay.
We've only, and so other than Alabama rewrote all their rules. They're basically they accept the criteria by adoption. Other than they require a high school diploma and the criteria doesn't. You just have to be 18 years old. That's not an overlay for us. So Alabama did that. And we are, so the next thing we're doing is with our sister task force at the IAAO, International Association of Assessing Officers, which is a partner of the foundation. We are actually going to their meetings now. So in Alabama, they're having their regional chapter convention in March. We're going there to tell those people, those assessment people, you are now eligible to use your experience to get licensed if you choose. Now we're putting the word out so they can say, oh, even if 20 of them do that, that's 20 replacement appraisers in Alabama with experience. So we're now sending the message out to these states that have adopted it, that are using that particular experience, that's available for these people. So we're doing an outreach on that side too. And John, what did the gal from the Pennsylvania DOT tell us in West Virginia that they're having a trouble actually supplying appraisers at the DOT themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, they would love to be able to take people and get them in from assessment to DOT because they just didn't have enough. I mean, look, everybody's struggling, right? We have the same limited population of individuals available, and it's a question of how do we best leverage them. You know, when we're talking about state or federal government employees who've had a career in valuation and appraisal work, the ability to take somebody who maybe hits the point in government employed where you've maximized your retirement benefit, you could retire early, but still want to have a second career, making all of that experience readily portable and applicable to the licensure process for becoming a state licensed or certified appraiser. Again, to me, just speaking personally, it's a very common sense approach to not only giving them opportunity, but backfilling in the near term what that capacity challenge is going to potentially look like. And you know, look, this is not going to be the one thing that solves for the capacity challenge for 5 years or 10 years, but in the next 2 to 3 years, it can be the thing that makes sure there are still enough people to keep it viable while we give the AQB time to get through this next change in the criteria, potentially to make entry more attractive and more straightforward for individuals with whatever these changes will look like. But it's got to be all of the above approach in trying to find solutions, because if Pete, I think, just kind of hammered home, if we don't change anything, this is probably going to die on the vine as a profession. And then those who needed the service and can't find it will go elsewhere to do what they need to do to move their own processes along. And I'll tell you candidly, because I talk to the folks at GSEs constantly, it's not like they want to go away from appraisers and appraisals, but they're going to alternatives because they can't get appraisals and appraisers readily enough in certain circumstances. The VA, Pete and I were just talking, they've got 120 VA appraisals in Alaska they can't place, which means there's 120 veterans who can't use their VA benefit. Who does that serve, right? So we've got to find solutions that get people in the door more readily, that get them deployed, that help maintain the workforce at a sustainable level while we get those longer term solutions in place.
That was very well said.
Well, that's our pitch. And we're, like I said, your state is not, there's not a lot of wrong in your regulations at all. It's just there's a couple of these barriers to entry that could be attractive to people.
But these are actionable.
Like there's 7 states that don't even recognize the licensed, the license.
We didn't
State
used
license
to.
appraiser.
And that is really problematic. It's problematic for a couple reasons. Number one, currently it's the only one that doesn't require a college degree. Now that might go away. However, if you transfer from this state as a licensed appraiser to like Pennsylvania, Florida, and you want to go practice in that state and you're a licensed appraiser, too bad, you're out of business. They don't recognize your license. And so you had to move there. You don't have a job anymore. That's ridiculous.
Where you have to upgrade before you move.
Well, how are you going to do that? You didn't have a college degree.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to do that?
If you had 5 years of experience.
Well, only if the
Yeah.
state adopted that pathway.
Right.
A lot of states said the 5 different pathways that the
Yeah.
AQB lined out. Some states didn't adopt that, so it doesn't matter if you have 5 years.
Well, they can come
experience.
to Oregon
Right.
and get licensed and we'll take their fee.
Correct.
And yeah,
And so, those are some significant overlays that we want to have addressed.
right.
And you actually hit on a great point that we've seen in other circumstances where individuals will venue shop for where it's most efficient for them to get licensed or certified. We've had folks take PREA in one jurisdiction that it's 100% accepted, get licensed in the jurisdiction, cross the state line and get their reciprocal license residential credential in the state that didn't accept PREA. That doesn't serve anybody's best interest, right? To create a system that incentivizes people. Pennsylvania, I pick on Pennsylvania all the time, not because I hate them, because I'm on the City of Philadelphia Home Appraisal Bias Advisory Committee, and we know we have big challenges in Pennsylvania. But you can go to New Jersey. It's a lot easier. You can come down to Maryland. It's easier. Get all your stuff done, practice for 5 years, upgrade, and then go to Pennsylvania. That, again, that's not serving the interests of the appraiser, the licensing board, the state itself, or the individuals who rely on those appraisal services to underpin mortgage transactions in their state. So really, that comes back to the crux of why we're doing this on the task force, is to go to states and just simply say, look at what you're doing, think critically about it. If there's a really good rationale for it, hey, that's great, let's document it, because maybe that's the best practice for somebody else as well. And if there's not, consider changes, because at the end of the day, we want to serve the best interest of as many different groups and individuals and stakeholders as possible when we go through the licensing and certification process for appraisers.
Yeah, and so last week we were in Nevada, and they're one of the only states that don't accept PREA. And so Scott and I were in Nevada last week, and we just said, we know people that are licensed here that use PREA, because when you go into PREA, you pass, and then they just went over to Arizona and got a license, and then never been in Arizona. They got their license in Arizona, walked over and said, I want a reciprocal license. They don't say, where'd you get your experience? You have a license. Mm-hmm. They gave them a license. And the agency was looking at us. I'm like, yeah. I said, so you beat yourself out of the licensing fees. You beat yourself out of the process of reviewing their application and everything. And now you just had to give them a reciprocal license. And you're the only state that doesn't accept PREA. That doesn't make any sense. And so we're just trying to make states aware that there's no real reason to overlay the criteria unless you have this, what I would call a statement of reasonable necessity.
Right.
Here's why we have this.
Yeah.
And so the public knows, and not just the public, that new applicant that's trying to be an appraiser knows why he has to do this overlay in your state. Maybe it's a state requirement to have a class on state rule and regulation. We wouldn't even care about that overlay. Right. Big deal. You want them to understand your real estate laws and regulations and have them take a 25-question test? That's an overlay. We don't care. And then you can say the reason we do that is because we want them to understand our state rules and regulations.
Right. Been a topic of conversation here a couple of times. Can I ask,
yeah, go ahead.
How many states at this point have adopted PREA as acceptable appraisal experience?
Scott, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
The question was, how many states have adopted PREA?
To one degree or another, every jurisdiction, except, as you mentioned previously, Nevada. There are 44 that currently accept PREA fully, and there are about 7 or so that are still in one phase of rulemaking or another, and they will come online here, in the coming weeks and months.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's just the opportunities that we have here are amazing. Now, as far as timing goes, I mean, we could go ahead and start looking at, some of the, mass appraisal and
Yeah.
review and the desktop thing. We gotta, especially, those two. The mass appraisal could be a little more challenging.
As far as the review process on our side for vetting applicants for licensure for the exam.
Or,
Mhm.
it could be, but with the potential, well, there will be criteria changes. So when you're traveling from state to state, and John, this is a question for you as well. Are you recommending that folks wait until we see what the AQB is going to do with their criteria before we open up this whole thing?
No,
Or-
because the criteria, they're probably not gonna have the criteria ready till 2027 or 2028. John, would,
Yeah, even if they adopt a new criteria at the end of this calendar year, which would be aggressive considering they'll do at least one additional exposure draft, right?
Yeah.
And those take months to put together based on comment feedback. There's typically a 2-year implementation delay because some states have to go in legislatively, right? Most states have to go in legislatively, and a lot of states have legislatures that only meet every other year. So they bake in that 2-year delay, which means even if everything got done at the end of this calendar year, that wouldn't take effect till 2028, right? And I think for you guys in particular, looking at your statutes and regulations, I think you have more regulatory control over process than other states do. Like, again, we'll pick on Nevada because we were just with them last week. They have a lot of stuff that's statutory in nature. It makes it harder for their board to go in and make adjustments and changes in real time. I think you have a little more flexibility. Pennsylvania is another state. Even if they can do it regulatorily, they have a 4-step, 2-year review process. So they can't get ahead of things and make changes promptly. So I would say if you feel motivated to make changes, to reduce overlays, if you feel there's an opportunity to do it in an efficient manner, there's no reason to wait. The benefits are going to inure immediately. And then as we get these additional changes that come on that create more opportunity pathways, we can build those in as well. So the short answer is no, there's no benefit to wait.
and one way you can do that all in one bundle is adopt by reference.
That is something, now that would have to
There's
be
10
done.
states that do that. That means that you never have to change your rules again, that you've adopted the criteria and USPAP by reference. Now, USPAP doesn't have an ending time period anymore. So they could change USPAP tomorrow. They could change it the next year, depending on the need. And this AI thing there's probably gonna be some change, but there's no like 2022 to 2025.
Right.
And so if you adopt by reference and you say, why would you ever not adopt USPAP by reference? It is what it is. And so forget putting a date in there. And that's what we say about the criteria too. If you adopt it by reference, anytime they change your criteria, and if you're really aggrieved by that change,
So
you
that
can
would-
always go back and
Yeah.
overlay it.
There is
Yeah,
one hang up with that, at least as it relates to Oregon. What I understand is that when we adopt by reference here, we have to cite a reference edition. So that's a very easy change when.
And even
What-
that can be done in a short.
Right, and so in administrative rules, when historically, when a new edition of USPAP is issued, before it goes into effect January 1st of whatever year, prior to that, the board goes through its rulemaking process, generally around the same time as the budget process, but we adopt that edition of USPAP as promulgated by the yada, 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 issued on effective, we cite the effective date in that edition, which is a very easy,
Right.
cross that out, put the new date in, as far as adoption by reference. So as far as
And there's
as
nothing
far
wrong
as the
with that.
criteria goes,
use-
the criteria has an issue date,
Yeah,
right?
the USPAP won't be a problem for,
John,
well,
do you have a
for a
comment on
while.
that, John?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I was going to say too, incorporation by reference is also not all or nothing. I think sometimes people hear that and they think, oh, we got to take everything as it is. Pete was chuffed to learn that Montana is a state that incorporates by reference but has specific exceptions or exemptions from that incorporation by reference. So that was a recent discovery we made. So you can incorporate by reference, but where it makes sense for you as a state based on your specific needs for your licensees or just public interest protection, to have specific things you want to do a little differently, you can do both. It's not either or. And I think sometimes when we talk about incorporation by reference, it's thought of as like, we're just going to take everything the AQB gives us and the ASB gives us, and we don't retain any control. You still have the ability to go in and specifically change things that you believe will better serve your licensees or
I
your
did
public.
not. I don't.
John, I guess I didn't get our leave behind document. I'll have IE send it to them. And the leave behind document is going to have some examples. It's going to have a letter of what our mission is and from me and what our goals are. And then basically it's going to have some examples. And so the Montana administrative rules in there is 1 page for accepting ad valorem experience, and that how it calls out that you have to have 2 USPAP compliant reports submitted for review. Well, that's in the leave behind document, and there's the Colorado example, there's an example of Washington's. And so there's some examples in there, Utah's, that you can look at to say, oh, okay, well, here's how they overcame that challenge in a meaningful way that made everybody at least comfortable with accepting that experience. And so we provide examples of state rules that have already been written. And again, like John said, we incorporate by reference, but we also had this, we wouldn't call it a carve out, but if you're going to do the mass appraisal experience, it doesn't say in the criteria that they have to submit standard 1 and 2 work. They assume that you would review their mass appraisal work, but the boards don't have the experience to do it. So we require regular appraisal assignments. And we got, our justification was, you're asking for a standard 1 and 2 license, just show us that you can do that. Give us a couple samples and your experience.
We love Montana.
So anyway, we'll email you guys the leave behind document that we've been bringing to every state, and that'll help solve some of these questions you have. And it's got frequently asked questions from our sister task force of anything that you have questions about mass appraisal. And
your personal cell phone numbers and all of that.
John and I's personal cell phone and email are on every document we send, so you can call us anytime.
That sounds like a bad idea.
Well, guys, this has been absolutely wonderful. We appreciate you being here and supporting us and bringing information that we don't have. And we already knew about mass appraisal. I kind of knew about review. That's something I didn't. So you pointed out 3 real.
Well, that was John's morning. You found that in your
Thank
rule
you,
list.
John.
You know, you hand a recovering attorney a document. I'm going to read it with a fine tooth comb. So
it's unless John's meet me there, I email him from the airplane. I'm like, give me your thoughts.
Right.
And that propels us.
Right.
Take along.
Right. Well, this has been wonderful. So it's 10:30 now. How about if we take like a 10-minute break and
I was just going to ask you for
right,
that.
exactly.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, and then we'll jump back in because I think we can get through the rest of our meeting real quick.
Relatively quickly,
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Okay, so we will pause. Can you pause us for just a minute?
Thanks, John. Scott. I think Scott.
thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
You betcha.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay.